Like, a round of applause for yourself. Support women of color. Yes! Yes! Oh my gosh. Okay, so the reason why we're all here to celebrate these amazing actresses, these amazing people who have done just. I know what a huge impact watching various women of color in sci-fi and television has had in my life. And so I wanted to, in this particular panel, help to feature that. So my name is Latisha. And these are my amazing panelists. Can you tell everybody your name, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Halima. I have a YouTube channel, Hamilam TV. Subscribe. And I'm also a sometime cosplayer, not as accomplished as these ladies here, but I'm just like you. I love to go to cons. I like to document them and then put them on YouTube, and I have a blast. And I'm really grateful that you guys are here today. Thanks.
My name is Naisha. I don't have a YouTube channel. I do have a Facebook page, Late Night Cosplay. Yeah. And clearly, obviously, I love cosplaying at cons. That is like my thing. I do it all the time.
Hi, I'm Allegraana. I'm a cosplayer, artist, and model, and I'm very excited for you guys to hear all of my long pent-up rants about color characters in media.
You know, so basically this entire panel, as this entire con is basically about hashtag representation matters. And I don't know what's going on over there. What's happening?
There's an orchestral component.
I guess. It adds to the ambiance of the panel.
All right. So first of all, like I said, thank you for coming to this panel. And even though there's some music going on, I would like us to do a little exercise first. So can everyone close their eyes with me really quickly? Now, I know it's going to be tricky with the music and conflicting music at that, but I want you to give it a shot. I'd like you to imagine yourself as a child. And I will imagine the different clothes that you would run in, the clothes that you would adventure in. See its color, imagine its texture. And then I want you to imagine yourself running just for the fun of it until you reach your special place. That place where you feel like you can do anything. Then I want you to look just beyond it to the world around you. A world full of fun and adventure just waiting for you. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes. Now I know it's a little difficult with sounds, but I have a couple questions for everybody. One, just raise your hand. Raise your hand if you went to someplace imaginary. Someplace imaginary. A couple of people, great. Hands down. Raise your hand if you went to someplace real. Now here's the doozy. Whether we went to someplace imaginary or someplace that was real, who went someplace that they've been before? The reason why I ask this question, because when I think about the ways we tell our stories, I think we imagine ourselves as the heroes of our own stories. And that's one of those things that no one can take away from us. So this is a picture from a story called Amazing Grace. Like Grace, I believe often when we were young, we imagine ourselves as the protagonists of our own stories. We are the heroes, we are the warriors, we are the wanderers, the heroes, and the bards of our own stories. And sometimes we're the villains and the destroyers. But whatever role we play, we are important in our own stories. Until, as people, or sometimes as specifically as women of color, we begin to play with others. We go to school and we're inundated with media, books, television that is filled with people that don't look like us. And by that erasure, it's telling us that we don't belong. And it whispers to us that the stories that we hear are not the stories for us. In this particular picture, she's about to do a school play. And the teacher asks, who wants to be Peter Pan? And Grace shoots her hand up. And then one classmate to the side of her whispers, you can't be Peter Pan, because you're a girl. The other person whispers to her, you can't be Peter Pan. Peter Pan's like not black. But like many of us, Grace defiantly raises her hand anyway. In 1998, an educator named Emily Stiles published an article called Curriculum as Window and Mirror. She said that learning doesn't take place in a vacuum, it's always contextual. And she continues by stating that education enables students to look through windows, to see the realities of others. And also, we get to look into mirrors to see our own realities reflected. And in sci-fi fantasy, in whatever medium, it's always contextual. It lives beside our own reality and bends and twists and analogizes our own stories and values and beliefs back at us. And the genre as a whole is meant to be a massive, uniquely framed window that's just really cool. You know, we can see the past, the present, and the future. And we see all of these new things reflected back at us. And so, like Emily Stiles puts it, sometimes by glancing through these windows, we can see each other through humanity. And then the window, if you look at it the right way, it can become a mirror. And you see yourself reflected in another story. And one would hope that in a genre where literally anything is possible, dragons, orcs, magic monsters, that people of different, diverse cultures and phenotypes would be common. But we know that's not the case. And so Emily Stiles continued her paper by saying that white males find in the house of curriculum many mirrors to look in, and very few windows with which to frame their lives. And women and men of color, on the other hand, find almost no mirrors for them, and often it's all windows. And by that nature, white males are thereby encouraged to focus solely on their own feelings, concerns, and realities to the exclusion and invalidation of other people's truths, while the rest of us are really uncertain whether or not we exist. Or, as Mindy Kaling put it when she was doing press for A Wrinkle in Time, she said, I loved science fiction and fantasy growing up, but it was a genre that largely didn't love me back. So, the purpose of this panel is to show women some love. That we love your beauty and your accomplishments and your struggles and vulnerability. We love your tears and insecurities and your struggles, your desire to be a fairy tale princess, or a desire to be the fearless leader fighting for the liberation of her people. This panel is to show love to the doctors and warriors and mothers who have graced our screens over the years. Now, would you like to know how Grace's story ended?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, before we do that.
She became Michelle Nichols.
Yes, she did! Yes, she did! All right, so Nichelle Nichols. We know her, we love her, but I want to reiterate her story because it's important that we remember where we come from. So, Nichelle Nichols played Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek, so the original series, 1966. While she's remembered for this particular show, she was also the first African-American woman to be in the main cast of any series at that time, not just science fiction. Now, Nichelle Nichols was a classically trained dancer and singer. And after about the first season of Star Trek, she decided, I'm done with this, I'm going to move on to Broadway. And it was at a dinner for the NAACP where she met Martin Luther King. And he told her, you can't go. His children see because it showed a multicultural reality where people were equals. And he said, don't you know what an inspiration you are to little girls everywhere? We need you. One of the little girls that she inspired was a child named Karen Johnson. Karen Johnson lived in a small apartment in Manhattan with her mother. Karen Johnson was about 10 years old. She saw Star Trek for the first time and ran to her mom and said, "Mom, I just saw a black woman on TV and she ain't no maid." This was a shocker. And Karen Johnson, later known as Whoopi Goldberg, took that love for performing that she found in watching that into her life. Now, she became, in the 80s, this revolutionary comic and performer, compelling in dramatic roles, amazing as a comedian. So, in 1987, when Star Trek Next Generation came around, and she was like, "I want to be in this show," no one believed her. Because they're like, you a superstar. Why do you want to be in this rinky-dink sci-fi show? And she had a lunch with Gene Roddenberry, and she said, "Listen, I am a Star Trek fan. I was a Star Trek fan long before I was ever Whoopi Goldberg." This is Gail Fisher. Now, Gail Fisher's story is interesting because her genre is not science fiction fantasy. She was on a show called Mannix.
Yes.
She played Peggy Fair, and she was the second black woman to be in a major television role, and the first to win an Emmy, I believe. Yes, to win an Emmy and a Golden Globe for Outstanding Supporting Actress. Outstanding Supporting Actress. And she said there are certain people who had no knowledge of black people's lives. And so she hoped that they learned something by watching her as Peggy Fair. And she loved the work that she did. One thing interesting, like I said, she was the Outstanding Supporting Actress. A black woman wouldn't win the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a television series until 45 years later, when Viola Davis won. Now, the thing about Gail Fisher is that by the time she passed away in 2000, her story was largely forgotten, and the accomplishments that she made, I believe, deserve to be honored. So I went to a short ritual with everyone, very short. Something I learned from some of the artists here, and what I'll say is I'll say her name, Gail Fisher, and you will respond, "We honor your story." Okay? Gail Fisher.
We honor your story.
Thank you. Gene Torres, you know her, you love her, she's amazing. You deserve her. I love this woman. That's the total reason for the slide. Seriously, just holding it down in various television shows because why the day ends and why. That's Gina Torres. I love her. She's amazing. Seriously, that is the end. And lastly, I'm talking very briefly about Kristen Kirk, only because, as you may have noticed in the slideshow, there are plenty of women who I have on the slideshow who may not necessarily be, obviously, people who have, diverse ethnic heritage. Something interesting about Kristen Kirk is that her mother is Chinese. What I really liked, because the Chun-Li movie was extremely ill-advised if you saw it. However, both in the Chun-Li movie and in her series Beauty and the Beast, her character was biracial, just like she was, which I found interesting. And so I think it's something to consider when someone can play themselves, even when someone might not visually believe who they are. So for instance, it'd be the difference in Rosario Dawson playing a role that was an African American role as opposed to an Afro-Latina. One is just a little bit more true. Now we get to hear the end of Grace's story. So when Grace came home, saddened by what her classmates said that she couldn't play Peter Pan, her grandmother took her to the ballet, where they had a beautiful black ballerina playing as the new Juliet, someone who was actually from her grandmother's home country of Trinidad. Grace was so inspired that she danced and sang all the way home. And of course, with that inspiration, knowing that she could do everything, anything, just like Karen Johnson knew that she could do anything after seeing Nichelle Nichols, Grace in the story kicks ass in her Peter Pan audition. And now, onward with the panelists. Writer, filmmaker, theater person, essentially. And this is just something that I love doing research on. And so, as someone who's kind of a media critic and also a media producer, all of this work is really close to my heart. So, ladies, oh, and can someone, there's something, like, we can make this place brighter.
I know.
Is there a light?
Put the sliders down.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, I can see a little bit more colors. Sort of. All
There's
right,
so many
it's gone
people
now.
out there.
Start off with some questions for you guys. Hold up, let me grab them.
While the questions are being grabbed, did anybody want to grab a seat that's standing? Or you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Yeah, there's a couple of spots.
Right here.
Okay.
All right, so we have the wonderful cosplayers and media makers here on this panel, and I did have a few questions for you guys. The first one is, including live action children's programs, who was the first woman or girl of color you remember seeing in sci-fi fantasy television, and what was your reaction to that character at that time?
Okay, so mine's a twofer because I couldn't narrow it down. I was like, chronologically, I don't know which of these ladies appeared first in my life, but my parents are big Star Trek fans. So Star Trek was kind of like an omnipresent force in our house. And in particular, I remember Alana Torres, who was on your slideshow, and she really, it was her last name, Torres, the same last name as mine, which, you know, I went to a private school. I was the only Torres in my grade, and it was difficult being a brown kid in a private school and a nerd on top of that. And I was not super into my last name, to be honest. But Balana was so cool, and my dad would joke. He'd be like, "She's a Taurus. She's related to us." And I was like, "Yeah." And then the other one would be Brandy as Cinderella, because I was super into fantasy. I love fantasy. I like fairy tales, and I'm sure you guys are all aware. Like a lot of the stuff that has been available traditionally has been very Eurocentric. The fantasies all take place in some sort of, you know, this is basically Europe, and we're all using European names and swords. And if they're brown people, they are very exotic and other, and we don't really interact with them. But like Brandy in this beautiful fantasy world with her crazy family that didn't really make a lot of sense, and her handsome Prince Charming and beautiful dresses, and like it was the first time that I was like, I felt like I could be in a fairy tale too. And so that really, and of course all the music was great, the costumes were great, and I was so into it. And there was Whoopi Goldberg, of course. And so those two instances I distinctly recall, like for the first time being like, hey, that could be me. I could be like this person. And it was, I mean, it was really cool. It was really meaningful in a way that I didn't really process until just now when you asked me that question. and realizing like how much that meant to me to have that. Like it wasn't much, but it mattered so much to me.
So you stole both mine.
Oh no.
But so my household was pretty much the same. Like my dad was the big sci-fi buff in my family, and his show was Star Trek. So probably the first one I saw was Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan, and I loved everything about her. The way she dressed, the way she was, that she kept a blaster behind the thing. It was like she created things. The hats, the church hats. Oh my goodness, like that's what they remind me of, church hats. But I love that she like always had that air of like she knows this last little tidbit that nobody else knows. She knows and she could tell you, but she won't because you need to find out for yourself. So that was her. And then Balana also because I identified with her a lot because she's kind of seen as like the hothead on the show, and always, as a little girl, I always got told, you got an attitude, you need to tone that attitude down. I'm not toning it down. She didn't have to tone it down. Why do I have to tone it down? I'm going to tone it up if you keep telling me to tone it down. And in some cases I did, and it got me in trouble. Kind of like she did. But yeah, so those are my two.
Well, I mean, yeah, for me it was Whoopi Goldberg. And for me it was, I loved her power. She was confident. She would give anybody the business. I mean, how many people you know stood up to Q? She was like, I loved that, okay? I loved her fashion. I loved her headdress. And for me, you thought of it as church.
It's like church time.
For me, at the time, I was growing up in Southern Africa, and, you know, we have, you know, you express your power, or you express your mood, or you express yourself in colors and with your headdress or your jewelry. And so, you know, you could kind of tell what was going to happen. You know, is she going to sneak libations to you? Is she going to give Captain Picard advice? You know, so she was just amazing to me, and she inspires me that way now, you know, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna have a little bit of libation to give me some strength. Or, you know what, let me take some advice and hear it and listen to what other people are saying, you know, keep other perspectives, so.
And somewhat in honor of what happened. So we have the second Yellow Ranger here, like yay, and that's in my soul. But I also want to say, for me, also the first Yellow Ranger, Trini, was inspiring to me, like highly inspiring. And I just remember watching her and being like, she's smart, she's confident, and I can do that. Like, she had the personality trait and the attitudes which I felt that I could identify with, which I feel like sometimes in the portrayal of women, especially, it's not as much so now, but just earlier it was kind of like the women who I saw were to be saved or to be rescued, or, you know, some type of prize to be won, and not necessarily having their own agency. And so I distinctly remember Trini having a lot of agency, you know, and that's something I know that inspired me growing up. I do that. Often in, you know, the sci-fi television genre, you have a woman of color who is like the one in the group. And so what do you think are the consequences, positive or negative, with that characterization?
I think one of the problems with that, and I guess let me do the pro first. The pro is that you do get that representation. You do get to see this person, you know, hopefully represented in a good way, but like usually if they're part of the team, like it's a positive role model for people. But the flip side of that is that when they're just like the one, I feel like they're kind of divorced from like their culture. Like it's more difficult for that to be expressed. Like for a really obvious comparison, Black Panther, like the culture of Wakanda is very evident, very vivid, very beautifully depicted. But when you have just one person, when it was just Black Panther by himself, that didn't come through as much. Like you knew that he was from somewhere, but you didn't really see him like living his culture, expressing it, having that familiarity, the traditions, you know, everything that comes with that. You can't see that when they're just by themselves. And so you kind of lose some of that nuance when the character doesn't have anyone else to play off of.
So, I think so. I'll start with the pro as well. I think when like that character gets to be a representative for their culture, it's really good if they're a good representative, because they get to like check other characters when they like start to step out of line. You know, like, hey, wait, you need, you know, chill, cut that out. But I think it can be bad if they're like home to all the negative stereotypes of a character. Like Latisha, you and I were talking earlier about Cindy from Dark Angel. I'm sorry, I hated her character. I could not stand her because they like made it seem like it was okay if you're a womanizer. If you're a woman, it's okay. You know, and I'm like, no. So I'm like, please. I just want to like refuse that she ever existed. And it's not because she was like not the only one, but like she was the one that kind of looked the most like me on that show. And I'm like, why? Why? Please, just no. No. So yeah, like if they're just home to all the negative, or what I perceive as negative stereotypes, then it's just such a disappointment to see that.
Well, for me, it's I'll also start with the pros. I mean, it's great to be able to see yourself or identify with yourself on camera or in media or any type of situation. You're always looking to say, it's great. But the negatives would be then that person has to be everything to everyone. And everyone is diverse. We are diverse people. We have diverse experiences. There are clumsy people. There are reserved people. There are crazy people. And you want to see that experience reflected. And so when you have that one person, they're either always overly noble, never step wrong, and they're the one that always, oh my God, they're so amazing. Or they are just the negative stereotype, they're absolutely home, they're pushing drugs, there's no diversity in the experience. So when that person is the one, it's either you get one perspective, or they're not allowed to have agency or do different things, so yeah.
I thought of another con real quick.
Okay.
The other con would be if you have your team of people and there's the one brown girl. When you have a group of cosplayers and then they come to you and they're like, hey, you're brown, you want to be that one, right? You're like,
I get told to be Storm one more time.
I love her, but I love the character, but maybe you identify more with a different one. And it's
Or you have that one character who's just there just to look like it's diverse, and all they say once in a while is, it's over there. I will go get it. And then you never see them again.
I'm sorry, that just reminded me of that line from Nana, the teen movie.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just here to say, that's what.
That's right.
Damn. Which of course has some truth to it. And so it's interesting, when we see that and we are able to call that out. But kind of talking about kind of the sometimes you have those very negative portrayals or negative aspects of a character, because I think sometimes you can have aspects of a character which are not positive, but they flesh them out, because we all have multiple aspects of our character that are not quite sanguine. So how do you think stereotypes influence the creation or interpretation of women on screen? And then also, how does the desire to avoid stereotypes sometimes help or hinder a character?
Ooh, that's a good one. I struggled with that one.
Why don't we start on that end?
Ooh, no, I'm just kidding. So, when you have, I think we already kind of addressed it a little bit by when you say you have that one person or that one character. That person could be an absentee mom or an absentee dad, but they could be a brilliant scientist at work and saving lives at the hospital, So just because they're that one person, they have different experiences and things like that. And I think that people are afraid they're keenly aware of the needs to have diversity, but then they just really, really want to have it where the person or the sole representative is just either overly perfect and, they're married, they never fight with their spouse, and they've got the perfect children that speak like adults, and, all of that. Or you've got the drug dealer or the prostitute or anything like that. And
Sorry,
so
I'm losing you.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I love them. Like they should bachata away. I'm really excited about it, but we could really use a microphone.
So I guess it just takes away from the diversity of experience when you're just pushed one certain type of experience or one certain type of character. And so, what we need is to go ahead and just, of course, obviously, just have more diversity and more diverse experience. Because you could have diverse people, but they could all, people of color and non-people of color, but then if they all have the same experience, that's not really diversity. So you have to have diversity of thought and diversity of look as well.
So yeah, so I think we kind of covered it. So I think like basically the biggest pitfall, whether you're playing to all the stereotypes or trying to avoid all the negative stereotypes, is basically the character just doesn't really get to feel authentic. You know, like you said, like if they're too perfect or they're the absentee drug dealer, and it's like either way, like I feel like I personally can't identify with either extreme like that. Like I have dimension, like sometimes, like you said, like I have negative characteristics. I got an attitude sometimes, you know. But like I'm good at my job. I go to work every day. I pay my taxes, so I'm still, you know, a decent person. So like I'd like to see somebody that has, you know, all of those aspects. There's not one extreme or another.
I think what it comes down to is that we need more people of color writing these characters, because if, you know, the old axiom, like, write what you know, like if the writers, if they don't have experience, like, you know, living our lives and you know, going about what is mundane and routine for us, like experiencing the things that we all experience as women, as people of color, as LGBT, like all of that, they can't write an authentic thing. And unfortunately, you know, there's been a certain amount of research showing that people do tend to be kind of insular within their groups, and so in theory, if you have a group, 10 minutes left, of mostly white writers, then they may not have necessarily enough experience with people of color to write authentic characters. And what they write, they will either fall back on like the stereotypes that we talked about, or they'll just completely erase the character's like identity as a person of color. And so just at the end of the day, we need more people of color writing these characters, so that, you know, you have these complex, multi-dimensional, that, you know, that don't rely on stereotypes, but also that you know, they can be. The example that I always use is like, I'm Latina, so, you know, the stereotype for us is like, oh, the feisty, fiery Latina. And like, yes, I am pretty fighty. Like, I will not back down from that. But like, also, you know, like, I have family members who are like just quiet and chill, and like that's also a real Latina character. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's great. I know we've got 5 minutes. So, does anyone have questions? Yes.
You guys watch cartoons? You talked about children. I was thinking about. You said the first one.
I'm sorry. There is music behind us. Can you?
You guys like cartoons? You guys were talking about the first ones. I was thinking about Keisha.
Keisha, yes.
That's awesome.
Oh my God, that is my girl for life.
And to Sally Richardson that plays her voice, you guys didn't have Dr. Blake from Eureka up there.
You're right. You're right. I missed her. I will get her next time. As you can see, it was over 70 women. Like, there was a bunch of shows covered. I did miss Eureka. I will rectify that. Yes.
I'd like to see some more animation too, because I remember I never watched X-Men, the animated series. I'm big into animation until my nephew said something about Wolverine. I had no idea that Aurora Monroe was in there. Now, interestingly enough, I finally did go try to figure out who did the voice for her. I don't think she was African American. But you put Gina Torres in the kind of group slide. She needed to be there, and also Rosalind Chow for Star Trek, the Next Generation.
Rosalind Chow was there.
I didn't see her in that one. I saw another lady there listed for.
You know, Hidden Figures. You know, these women, you know, are real and existed, and many people didn't know until that came out. But one thing I want to highlight is that when it comes to, I'm going to get real sociological on you guys. Sorry. When it comes to various systems of oppression, they are omnipresent. You have one story telling you you can do it. You've got 10 others telling you that you can't. And so I think it's really important for, you know, us as teachers, as grown-ups, as people in other people's lives to continually tell that story. You can, you can, you can, you can. Because all you have to do is sit around and you'll get a bunch of messages that you can't. So I think that's the thing. So while I think the Hidden Figures and you know, even Black Panther with its science focus, Wrinkle in Time had a science focus. even with those being out there, which is really important, we've got to remember to keep on encouraging that. You want to build a super robot that can fly? Good. Let's do it. Let's get some screws and pins and make it work.
Ironheart.
So on that note, are we about?
They waived the 5-minute warning at us, so I think
They did, but they waved it kind of early. I'm cool with chilling.
Did anyone else have another question? But I guess we'll just continue until they have
Until they
us
kick
out.
us out.
I actually had another question. I'm sorry. When we see all this, when we see representation in these sci-fi films to encourage, women, which is great, but like when we see that pushback, and sometimes it seems so systematic, it sucks. For example, I'll use one that's recent. With Star Wars, once I saw John Boyega, I'm like, how close are we to having a black female Jedi? And then once I saw that happen, I'm like, all right, we're probably gonna wait like another 20 years. These people are so like ingrained in your ways. It's like it feels like it's in the tradition, but it's not. Because when you watch the films, it's just proving there's a whole galaxy out there, a whole bunch of different people. Why can't he be a little dark, or why can't she be like black and have force powers? And what I really wanted to ask you all is that when you see that pushback, it's like, how far along the way do you think until we reach the point where it's like there's this major AAA film, it is starting women that look like all of you, and then she's kicking ass? Like, how far away are we from that?
I think it's just, we just have to keep on pushing and just pressuring, because change, even in our personal lives, is difficult. People don't like change. People can accept Wookiees, but they can't accept okay? But you have to keep on pushing them and showing these things are making money. There's an audience out there for it, and just keep on agitating for it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helped me deal with this a lot, as a huge Star Wars fan who was very deeply disappointed in the community watching that whole backlash go down, is also we need to keep uplifting and supporting communities that are by us and for us, because in terms of amplifying our own voices, that's what we need to be putting forward. And I think in this day and age, it's great that we are able to connect through social media and stuff, but we're also able to form these. Okay. We're also able to form communities and support each other and be there for each other when this kind of pushback happens. But we're also able to show how much joy we have and how much creativity and how we celebrate our geekdom, and showing that kind of stuff I think makes other people want to be a part of that too. So.
One thing that's interesting, that's actually one of the questions I didn't get to, is about kind of the backlash that you get when people, you have the race of a character has changed, and they're like, oh no, Nick Fury is Samuel L. Jackson, how horrible. You're like, it's Samuel L. Jackson, seriously. Come on. And what that backlash does, and it's seemingly predictable, but like I said, change is hard for people. It's really challenging. I know that a lot of us have concerns when it comes to things I'm thinking about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the original. They're it was way low key, not so much racist. It was, but it was also really revolutionary for its time. At that time, you had Wonder Years, and that's about it. And so change is slow, unfortunately. Yes, I see.
I'm trying to make this one quick. When you're talking about pushback and things that are, this is very much what black people do, this is what white people do, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to bring up a hot topic question.
Oh boy.
For females getting into these industries, how big of an impact, or maybe an anchor, do you feel that religion is for this? Because I've got a lot of cousins who ask me, why are you doing this? And every last one of them brings up the church as a reason why I should be doing something else productive with my day.
I guess it probably depends on the particular religious my family is Catholic, and some of them are more conservative than others, and so I definitely get some like concerned, like, is this really what the Lord would want you to be doing with your body? And so yeah, I guess to kind of like answer that, like I think it depends on where you're coming from, because like there are some churches that are more liberal and more progressive than others. But it was definitely something that I had to deal with a lot when I was getting into this. I do a lot of, a lot of my costumes are like very bikini oriented, and like I got a lot of flack from that from my family, particularly like older female members of my family who were deeply concerned about how are you going to get married now? So yeah. I definitely see where you're coming from with that question, but I also personally, like, I just kept doing it, and eventually they had to accept it. So,
Because change is slow, but it can happen.
just keep persevering, and they will see that you are happy, that you are healthy, that this is bringing you like joy in your life, and they will see that it's a good thing.
Just keep on
So,
So
that's
we're getting
basically-
the
we're
we're getting
getting
the
the
cut
get
it
out.
off thing.
Or-
So go ahead, and then you've got
Well,
to wrap
I
it
was just
up.
gonna piggyback on that and say, just do
there's
it
another
anyway,
panel.
because like I have the same deal. Some
Yes.
of my older female family members are like, "What are you doing? You're dressed like you're all evil, and you're tattooing yourself, and you're doing this." I'm like, you know what? If I have to be that one that just powers through it, and I'm the one that's constantly gonna burn in hell, whatever.
We're gonna